Alexander McQueen series, episode 3. The Horn of Plenty, everything and the kitchen sink for fall 2009 ready-to-wear collection. Hey fashion friends, today we are doing episode 3 of the Alexander McQueen series, which I'm very happy about. We will be talking about the autumn-winter 2009 collection called the Horn of Plenty. The collection was presented on the 10th of March 2009 in Paris, in Palais Omnisports, which was actually the same location as the previous collection that we discussed, which was Plateaus Atlantis. So if you missed that one, I will link it somewhere here so you can catch up if you want to, as this is episode 3. There will be a lot to unpack in this video, as you can imagine, so I split it in 5 different categories so it will be more accessible if you want to go back, skip. So we will talk about inspiration, background, then about the show, the venue and stuff like that. Then we will talk obviously about the collection, big deep dive, then hair and makeup, and at the end we will talk about the book that was commissioned to be made about this show, and of course some conclusions. So stick around, it's gonna be an interesting one, it's gonna be a long one, but it's gonna be a good one, so let's start. Let's start with inspiration and background, of course. So I think it's very important to know that the whole collection was dedicated to Lee's mother, with whom he was very close to and he loved her very, very much, and her death made a big toll on Alexander McQueen's life and could have been one of the reasons that he didn't want to stay on this planet anymore. But we will not talk about this today. I just thought it's important key elements to know that the collection was dedicated to his mother, and it revisited the designer's signature collections over the years, and it referenced also some iconic designs in fashion history, and was described by Lee himself as a retrospective of his 15 shocking years in fashion. So as you can see, it was some kind of summary of his work, of his career. Maybe he's trying to tell us something. Let's see. This was actually far from a nostalgic retrospective, as the concept of reinvention was explored through irony and parody, which is classic McQueen. Now, what was the inspiration behind this whole collection? This collection was a very powerful message and commentary on the excess of fashion in the modern consumer age. What is more, political undertones were also a source of inspiration, if you can even say that. Alexander McQueen actually really wanted to show what's going on in the world through his collection. He didn't want to just make a pretty collection to make a lot of sales, to make a lot of money. He wanted to speak through fashion about what's happening in the world, to show a different point of view. First of all, the catwalk was formed of shattered glass, alluded to the nation's collapsed economy following the crisis in 2008. McQueen used over-exaggerated forms with MC Escher prints of magpies and houndstooth check to show the pressure placed on contemporary designers to produce bigger and better collections, to sell to mass markets and to chase commercial success, which Lee was quite against. You can say he was not the one to make big sales, he was kind of against mass production, mass consumption. McQueen also revoked some of the haute couture classics of Chanel, Dior and Givenchy, as McQueen drew extensively on the fashion of the 1950s for the collection, particularly the hourglass silhouette. He made visual allusions to the new look created by designer Christian Dior, then the tweed suit that Coco Chanel was known for, and the little black dress popularized by Hubert de Givenchy. There were possible references to later designers as well, the wrap dress of the Yves Saint Laurent, the usual silhouettes of Cristobal Balenciaga. McQueen also had been referencing the so-called Hobo Couture collection by John Galliano for Dior, so as you can see there were a lot of shout-outs to other designers, and this is gonna be very interesting part. We will talk about those references as we deep dive into many looks of this collection later, so don't worry. Now let's move on to the show. So at the centerpiece of the set, Runaway, was placed a giant rubbish pile sprayed paint black. It was composed of props from past shows, for example a broken merry-go-round horse or crashed car parts. Added to these props were broken televisions and chairs, a washing machine pipe, and even a kitchen sink pipe, which was echoing to the show's subtitle, which said, "Everything and the kitchen sink," literally. To tie the collection back to the very beginning of his career, he named it the Horn of Plenty, referring to the London East End pub where Jack the Ripper's victim was last seen before her death, sharing its name also with the McQueen's first collection called Jack the Ripper Stalks His Victim, which was shown in 1992, with its connotations of excess, also suggested the viewer the impending disaster. What is more, derived from motifs in classical Greek and Roman mythology, the Horn of Plenty represents abundance, wealth, and prosperity. This symbolism exists even today, when the Horn of Plenty is often displayed as a centerpiece for harvest celebrations, specifically the Thanksgiving holiday in America, for example. You place a massive Horn of Plenty in the middle of the table. Hints of previous shows are also scattered all around the runway through set design, ambience, and the designs themselves. The energy of the space is quite heavy, quite dark, as the models walked through a circular runway around this pile of trash in the middle. It was kind of like they were walking around the past endeavors of Alexander McQueen, walking around this pile of garbage. It was very interesting setup. You must say that it was very interesting setup. No one has done this before. As usual, McQueen intended to stand out and attract attention by rejecting the safe approach. He described this collection to some journalists as a sackable offense. Because if he was not working for his own company, for his own namesake brand, he could be fired. Like, he could be fired as a creative director because he could not really afford to take such a big risk if he was working for Givenchy, let's say. But because he's working for McQueen, he could do whatever he wanted, and he did. So now let's talk about the collection, the main part, the most important part, the most interesting part. Let's go. The work on the collection took 6 months, approximately 6 months, from which 45 looks were presented at the collection's runway stage in this dark catwalk across roughly 3 phases, you can say. The first 14 looks were primarily based around houndstooth and check patterns. The color palette was mainly black and white, with strong accents of red and even orange. Looks 15 through 39, the largest part of the collection, mostly comprised ensembles in black with some red-based outfits as well. And then the final 7 ensembles were all showpiece dresses. McQueen's concerns about wastefulness and consumerism were reflected in designs that appeared to be made out of trash, such as coats that looked like beanbags or bubble wrap. These items were made from expensive, non-renewable specialist materials, such as paper, nylon, and lacquered silk. McQueen described the use of such materials as an additional layer of irony, because you can say it was like a haute couture material of trash. Opening the collection was, of course, a parody of Dior's new look. From there, Lee lappooned over well-known silhouettes by top couturiers to demonstrate how fashion ran out of ideas, with contemporary designers reinterpreting classics rather than attempting to be inventive. Look number 3 of the collection, for example, was a tubular ensemble made of tweed topped by a fabulous Tracy feathered headpiece. Is easily recognizable as a reference to the classic Chanel skirt suit. I mean, you can see it, it's literally Chanel. During his career, Lee often spoke about his disdain for money-hungry ideals of designers who didn't take risks in order to maintain a certain level of monetary success. Chanel is a casebook example of a brand that stays close to the house codes under each new creative director, never straying away from what seems to be working for them. If Lee had it in his way, every brand would be bigger advocate for taking creative risk, of course. The seventh look of the collection is a cocoon-shaped coat made of houndstooth, which bears great resemblance in shape to designs by Paul Poiret, the great couturier, one of the first couturiers and one of the greatest also. The self-proclaimed king of fashion, Poiret is revered as one of the earliest great couturiers. He's well known for his subversive 1910s so-called Oriental fashions, in particular his jupe culottes, which were considered to be one of the first high fashion examples of pants for women actually. Almost halfway through the collection, Lee showed multiple all-black looks in accordance with McQueen's tradition. Journalists and historians have speculated that look 16 in particular could be making reference to the iconic Givenchy little black dress. Let me know if you see it, because I think I see it a little bit. Do you see the resemblance? Following Dior with references to Givenchy was uniquely effective, as his first and only head designer role outside of his namesake brand was with the well-known French designer house from 1996 to 2001. The early years were rocky, with the designer's house mature, not so daring couture clients feeling displeased with his edgy East End inspired designs. I felt like McQueen really struggled when he was working at Givenchy. No one really loved him, no one really understood him, maybe that's a better word. But I think his collections were great. Just go back and see they were kind of crazy for Givenchy, but they were gorgeous. I don't understand the hate. I don't. Despite the theme of trash and rubbish and waste, the collection heavily references also the natural world, with animal prints and real furs appearing in this collection. He also recycled some of his own house codes, such as his blackbird print from the Birds collection from Spring-Summer 1995, a new variation of the iconic print using a magpie in flight was printed on a vibrant cherry red taffeta shirt dress. Fashion historian Alistair O'Neill, whom I had the pleasure to meet and attend his classes when I was at the university, noted in Greek mythology, women are often transformed into birds to escape trouble. And McQueen frequently said that he really wanted to transform women through the clothes he made, to protect and empower them, to make them stronger, to make men fear them because they are wearing these crazy outfits. Look number 8 features the same style of pheasant claw earrings that Lian had developed for look 14 of Dante, which was his show for 1996 autumn-winter. Sean Lian's accessories from previous McQueen shows were also recycled in this one, such as neck coils and claw earrings. Jewelry was essential to the way Alexander McQueen presented his designs, and from the very beginning of his career it featured in his catwalk shows. For example, the red dress with armor, jeweled yash mark was made by Sean Lian. The silver yash mark from I was reinvented as the hooded bodice of a silk ball gown printed with the image of a red milk snake. He made his first jewelry pieces for McQueen in 1995, and similarly to McQueen, he learned his skills through working in the trade rather than an art school education. However, McQueen actually had an art school education, but I feel like he learned more by working in the industry straight away. Looks 39 to 42 had patterns with a base of red. Fayers identified look 40, a red and a black feather dress, as a reference to a pheasant feather dress from the Widows of Culloden. Finally, close to the show's end, we need to talk about Paulina Cascina, who was McQueen's muse, and she had a very specific look made for her. Her ruched gown that narrows at the knees was made from a nylon that resembles garbage bag material. Her floor-length cloth, milled for McQueen from silk and synthetic fibers, resembles bubble wrap. Similar to that of her dress, a garbage bag material is also on her head. Alexander McQueen clearly was sending us a message by wrapping his favorite model, his muse, in a garbage bag material. Yeah. There was also a very strong gothic reference in this collection. We see darkly romantic black swan gown and the duck feathers enveloping the wearer in a bow-like form. The final two looks of the show, and you can say the most glamorous one, the most breathtaking one, and also the ones that make you think, Alexander Lee McQueen. What do you mean by showing us these two? Is there a hidden message? What are we supposed to think about this? What do you think about this? Because it looks like life and death for me, or heaven and hell, or beginning and end, or love and hate. Let me know what you think, because you can interpret this in so many ways. I wish I knew what McQueen meant by showing these two at the end. Actually, by showing the white one first and the black one after. What did you mean, Lee? We will never know. So the final two looks were a pair of knee-length dresses covered in duck feathers. These were inspired by the white swan and the black swan characters from the Matthew Byrne interpretation of Swan Lake, respectively. Look 44 in white alluded to the demure white swan with an exaggerated cowl surrounding the model's upper body and head. The final showpiece, in black, referenced the more aggressive black swan character. The dress has a small waist and large shoulders. This is primarily an exaggeration of the typical 1950s silhouette, but also resembles the puffy leg of mutton sleeves common in the 1890s actually. Now when it comes to shoes, I know you didn't see much of them because the gowns are so long, but let's have a look at some of the shoes because it's quite important to know what were the shoes. So when it comes to shoes, McQueen had experimented with extreme footwear for previous collections. As we know, the alien footwear, amazing. 3 seasons prior actually, his collection called La Dame Blue had included high platform shoes inspired by the Japanese Gita and the Venetian Chopin of the 15th century. He brought these ideas into the Horn of Plenty, which featured platform boots in houndstooth and red Geta style heels, with a thin strap like a Mary Jane shoe a little bit. There is a funny story from one of the models that walked the show at the time, which was Karlie Kloss. You may know her for her very significant signature walk. She said that the dress was way too long to walk normally. It was like an actual extreme sport to put on those shoes, to put on those massive garments, to have these massive headpieces of rubbish, and to still walk like you're a muse, like you're a diva. I will insert a little clip so you can get an idea what I'm talking about.
So I'm backstage at the show and I can tell that this is going to be a really special collection. The hair and makeup, you know, as I'm seeing it come together on my body, I'm like, wow, this is really going to be one for the books, literally. And we're all standing in lineup and I just remember my mind racing. I was so nervous because I was wearing this amazing gown that was so long. And even for me to say it was so long really means something. By the time I got up to where Lee was, I said to him, Lee, I am so sorry if I ruin your show. I really am nervous about tripping, and if I do, I'm so sorry. And I'll never forget, he said, Karlie, you wear the dress does not wear you. If you fall, turn it into a moment. Grab it and throw it. That is what proceeded to happen. I'm walking out on the runway. I take a couple of steps and I can already feel this dress is getting tucked under my heel. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm doing it. And I have my hand on my hip and I take my right hand and I bend down in the middle of the runway. I pull it out from under my heel and I throw it on the ground. And I feel like alive. I feel like totally full of adrenaline and freaked out from like breaking the rules. And I step off the runway and I think, okay, well, that may be the end of my career, but I gave it my best shot. And I said to Lee afterwards, I said, I'm so sorry, was it okay? He was like, you were great, you were fabulous.
Now let's talk about hair and makeup as one of the closing pieces, as one of the styling pieces that puts it all together. So the Gothic influence also carried into styling, mixing the grotesque with the farcical, models with faces whitened by Peter Phillips and dark, oversized, over-exaggerated, overlined, massive clown lips appear to be drag queen caricatures and homages to Leigh Bowery and Marilyn Manson, as some of his music was playing as the models were walking down the catwalk. I read somewhere that actually McQueen originally wanted to make the eyes pop, to make the accent on the eyes, not on the lips. But Phillips, the makeup artist, created a lip-centric look, drawing from McQueen's ideas as well as from his own. So it was like a collaboration. McQueen actually didn't come up with the makeup, it was the makeup artist. But that's also their job, to provide you with the makeup that will emphasize the collection even more, because you're the makeup artist, so you know better. The hair and makeup in general was inspired by the consumer-driven world of Terry Gilliam's Brazil from 1985. McQueen also wanted to draw on Eliza Doolittle at the flower market before she transforms in My Fair Lady. Palau's hairstyling would make up for this reference. He concealed the model's hair within head wraps and then added arrangements of aluminum cans wrapped in plastic, creating what Phillips called a dirty, early morning flower market look. Hairstyling and hats were unique to each model and each look, so not two models look the same, everyone looked completely different. Philip Tracy was commissioned to create hats for this collection, and he transformed basic household goods like trash bags, tires, and sprayed hubcaps into objects of beauty, if you can even say that, whilst hinting the problem of fashion being so disposable in the 21st century. Hairstylist Guido Palau made headpieces from aluminum cans, sprayed black and wrapped in plastic, so you had both hats. And if you didn't have a hat, you had a crazy kind of a hat hairstyle with cans sprayed with black paint. So no model just had open hair and like cute makeup. They all looked incredibly sophisticated and like an art form by itself. To sum up a little bit, McQueen said that this collection was very important to him, and he saw it as closing doors to his 15 years of career so far at the time. He saw it as his last collection as a young man actually stepping into adulthood, even though he was an adult, but he thought he was not a young man anymore. He was becoming more serious, and he wanted to close this crazy chapter of his designs in this Horn of Plenty, as probably these 15 years really were a Horn of Plenty. McQueen, who was 39 at the time of this collection, viewed the Horn of Plenty as the last he could make as a young man, and he sought to create a retrospective of his career to that point. To sum up this whole story, the Horn of Plenty was undoubtedly one of the most controversial collections made by the designer, and so was the makeup for the models, so was the catwalk, so was the whole mood for this collection. It was extraordinary, and a lot of people spoke about this show afterwards. McQueen had a lifelong battle with himself as he romanticized this work, but also through being a designer, he tried to escape from reality, from the problems that he had, from the dark traumas that he's been through, and he brought to life all of his bad memories, all of his traumas. He brought them to life through abstraction and underlying messages behind the collections that he produced for this industry. Lee's choice to intertwine personal life with work enabled him to produce raw, significant, authentic, and groundbreaking collections such as this one during this time, but ultimately led him fleeting a life where he pushed himself and his perfectionist mentality to extreme And sometimes he just tired himself so much because he tried to do the best he could every single time. What is interesting actually, McQueen had given all behind the scenes access to a photographer this time, Nick Waplington, who was invited to document the entire process of making the Horn of Plenty collection, which was the first one because McQueen wasn't really the one for interviews or for newspapers or for photo shoots, so him reaching out to a photographer was a big one, and it also could make you think why McQueen is commissioning a photographer, giving him access to all behind the scenes, to make a book about his own 15 years of career at the age of 39, when he's not thinking to retire. So what is he really thinking? McQueen insisted that this will be documented as he was closing the door of his first 15 years of design. He saw it as his last collection as a young man, as we said before, and the images of the behind the scenes were put together with Waplington's images of recycling plants, rubbish dumps, and landfill sites, juxtaposed with those of the collection to reinforce McQueen's point about the environmental destruction and the mass consumption and all of that. McQueen and Waplington selected about 300 photographs that McQueen arranged for the final book. The book Alexander McQueen, Working Process, was published in 2013, so after McQueen's death. As a last word, actually, it will be nice if we could quote Nick Waplington as he compared McQueen's way of working, of that of a painter or a photographer. I actually have a book from the exhibition that was shown in London about McQueen, and there's a quote from Nick Waplington there, so I will read it to you now. I think it will be a great summary to this whole video and this whole collection, so please listen. He would sit quietly, and then there would be this Svengali-like moments where someone would bring him a roll of fabric and he would jump up and grab the rolls of cloth and drape them over the model and pin them and move them, and then someone would run off and sew them and come back with them later. And it's these creation moments after periods of inaction, just like a painter or a photographer, these are the little things that take you forward. His work was almost performance art, the grand gesture. I think this is a very great summary to this collection, but also the way McQueen worked in general, because McQueen always worked on a stand. He was always spinning the material to the models. He was draping the fabric. He always saw, and he had to straight away drape it, not to forget what he's doing. So he was like a mastermind. He just pinned it on the model and it was done. It was great. So what did you think of this collection? Please let me know your thoughts on this. I think it was a very dark one, but also made you think a lot about the mass consumption, about the waste, about fashion being so disposable, and it was a very interesting one. I would say it kind of scared me when I first saw it. I was like, this is really scary. And then the more I saw it, I thought, wow, this is just like a great metaphor of where we are in the world and what's happening. And it's important to take that all in and think about it. And we have McQueen to thank for all of this that he created, that we can still look into it because it's still relevant today, even though it was like inspired by economic crisis of 2009, but I feel like we're still in crisis, so this collection is still valid today, and it's important to, from time to time, think about it or to watch the runway show and to have these memories come back to life of Lee being the greatest designer of all time. Thank you so much for watching episode 3. I will see you soon for the episode 4, and I hope you really like this video because I enjoyed making it, and I see you soon. Bye!